In this video, I'll quickly go over some of these extraneous settings and a couple of the more niche but still useful tools. So I'm just going to add a cube so that the scene is default. And from here, what I'm going to do is go into edit mode. I'd like to show you a few things, and then it's hopefully only going to take 2 or 3 minutes. Of course, if I click on any of these buttons to the side, we get a on-screen gizmo. I failed to mention that earlier, and I must apologize. Personally, I just use the selection tool, and by pressing W, I can change the different selection modes. So you can see that there's Bob Select, and then there's just regular select. Anyway, let's say that I want to snap this to a length. If I come up here and press this snap button, you can see that it'll now start snapping to the scene units. I believe this is based off of length. If I go to scene, and if I go from length to inches, it should have started snapping to them. That means I was incorrect. This snapping is decided based on the grid. If I was to go into top-down view and look down, then you can see as I snap, it snaps it to the grid that you can visibly see. Excuse me. If you want to change how it snaps or what it snaps to, you have all of these different options. So if I was to add a, let's see, what would be a useful case scenario for this? If I was retopologizing an object, I'm sorry, you'll have to use your imagination. That means that I am trying to use a different object to reproduce the same, use a different mesh to reproduce the same everything about the object. It's kind of hard to describe. This will mainly be with people learning modeling, but it's basically remaking the object lower resolution so that it can be textured, UV'd, and all sorts of other things. I'm sorry, I don't have a visual example in front of me. If I had thought about it beforehand, I would have. So it's my bad. But anyway, if I turn on clamping, this is within object mode, so it'll clamp the center point to whatever I want it to do. If I turn snap to face on, I can then snap it to the face of this object. And it seems that it snaps it compared to the closest vertice. So I can go down here, instead of snap with closest, I can snap to center, medium, or active. So these all do different things if you have multiple objects selected. So you can see now that the center of the object, if I had multiple objects selected, it would be their multiple center rather than their individual origins. You can see it's snapping to here. Okay. From here, you can feel free to play around with this functionality. Volume tries to snap an object to the volume of whatever you're snapping it to. This can be useful when you're placing joints as along the fingers instead of manually going in and making sure from all 3 directions and from perspective that everything is centered within the finger. You can simply snap the bones to the volume and they'll snap to the direct center or to the general center, and you can adjust them slightly after that. Anyway, that's something to do with rigging and not modeling. I apologize. The other minor things that are very useful is if I create multiple duplicates of this object, let me turn snapping off, I can change the point at which they rotate. So currently they rotate at the center of all of their origins, which would be right here. If I want to, I can go up to this transform point, and instead of medium point, I can select active element. So this will be the last object that I clicked on, or the one highlighted in yellow. If I want to change this, I can simply click on another object while holding down Shift. And you can see that it rotates around that. If I wanted to, I could rotate everything on individual origins. So you can see how this might be useful. And of course, bounding box center. Bounding box center is slightly different in that it's not the center of all of the objects, but it's the center of the box by which they would be fit into. So you can see now, even though that this is not the general origin of our general center of all these objects, it would be weighted over here. It transforms it around the center and between them. If I move these objects to the side, I can also change it to 3D cursor. And so now everything rotates around the 3D cursor. Also in display, we can change from global to local, normal, gimbal, view, and cursor transforms. I won't go over these individually, as the most important ones are global and local. So if I have this object selected, and I wanted to rotate it, let's say, and then let me go back to medium point, or individual points, it doesn't matter for this one. Excuse me. Sorry. If I was going back to this, and I wanted to rotate it along the X direction, what I can do is I can rotate X, and you can see that this is the world X direction. However, if I want it to be relative, I can press X a second time, and it will rotate along the relative axis. Same with grab. If I press G and then XX twice, it'll move it along the local x-axis rather than the global x-axis. I believe that pretty much sums everything up. And that should... Oh, wait, yes, I'm sorry. Proportional editing, the last bit of this top bar. So if you want proportional editing, when you move an object with proportional editing, you'll see this sphere appear. Since I have this object away from everything else, you won't see how this functions. But if I have this object closer to something else, you can see that it affects everything else based on the radial fall off. This is proportional editing. If I go in here, I can change the different curves. So I can have constant and then move everything within that radius depending on it. Though I'm not sure why you wouldn't just select everything and move them all individually. So I can change it to sharp, and you can see that it has a different fall off than before. This, of course, works in editing mode. So if I was to go in here, and if I was to right-click, subdivide it, 6-7 times, click on this point, and turn on this, you can see now that it deforms the mesh like that. Alright, I believe that pretty much sums everything up, and I believe that you can start to understand reapply all of the concepts that I have said so far. The next video, we'll be going over the basics of sculpture in Blender.